lately with the breaking into spring, finally, after 80 feet of snow, I decided that what is it I can do to be able to bring a little more peak performance out of my brain? Not that the winter did me in, but there's just something about the resurgence of springs that makes it go, oh my gosh, okay, let's enlarge our capacity. So, what can I do for my brain? So, I'm working on my body and the health there. But what can I do for my brain, for the cognition, for the memory, for the analytical, for the strategic? And I thought, okay, I want to talk about the physicality, the nutrition, the sociality, and what can we do to stimulate and stretch our brain in ways that we can do that in our life without it having to be another hard to do? Well, what is it? It's bring back the games. Step into the game world again and allow your brain to do some strategy with those games that, quite frankly, allow the brain to have a good time and step it into neurogenesis, which is making new brain cells, and neuroplasticity, where it makes more connections. The brain is very much like any other muscle. If we don't use it, it atrophies. If we don't keep it in continual condition, then it starts to lose its capacity. So what better way to sharpen the saw than to learn new things and to challenge our brain just a little bit? So here we are with your brain on games. A neighbor of mine, when he takes his girls to school, when he takes his kids to school, he does whodunits or problem solving little things that he finds on the internet. So they ride to school listening to these scenarios and solving these different problems. Brilliant. Starting out their brains when they're young to be able to stretch and to think out of the box. So I thought, what better way to start this show than to give you a whodunit, or should I say, what happened? So are you ready for a brain teaser? Here it is. Emily was sitting at her study table, home alone, on a cold and stormy night. Her parents had taken a flight earlier that morning to Australia as her grandmother had passed away. She'd wanted to follow her parents, but she had an important English examination the next day that she could not miss. The storm was getting heavier by the minute, and the wind was howling outside. All this noise made it very hard for her to concentrate. She was on the verge of dozing off when she was shaken alert by a sudden thud. She dismissed it as a window that must have been slammed shut by the wind. She tried to concentrate on her books when she heard a faint footstep. Emily got out of her room and looked around when suddenly, without warning, she was grabbed by the neck. She tried to scream, but it came out of her as a mere whimper as the intruder was pressing hard against her throat with his arm. She tried to free herself from his grip, but to no avail. "Give me your money," growled the man who had grabbed her from behind. There is none here. Please let me go," cried Emily. "Don't lie to me," screamed the increasingly agitated man. She felt the man strengthen his grip around her neck. She said nothing, and a few seconds passed in silence. Suddenly, the phone rang, which alerted both of them. "People will get suspicious if I don't answer the phone," said Emily with a controlled voice. The intruder let her go. "All right, but no funny business or else," said the nervous intruder. Emily walked towards the phone. She took a deep breath and calmed herself. She picked up the phone. "Hi, Em. How's the revision going?" said the caller. "Hi, Anna. Thanks for the call. Hey, you know those science notes I lent you last week? Well, I really need them back. It would be a great help to me. It's an emergency, so if you could give me them tomorrow, it would be great. Please hurry in finding the notes. I need to get back to my books. Bye." Emily hung up the phone. "It was wise of you not to say anything," said the intruder, although he was more than a bit confused by her conversation. "Now tell me where the money is kept," screamed the thief. "It's in my dad's room, the first room on the right. It's the third drawer down," said Emily. "Show me," said the man, and removed his grip from around her neck. She took a big gulp of air and nearly fell. She swallowed hard and said a silent prayer. She walked slowly, in silence, towards her father's room. All of a sudden, they heard police sirens. The intruder froze in his footsteps. He ran to the nearest window and jumped out. Emily ran outside in time to see the intruder being escorted into the car. She saw Anna and she ran towards her and hugged her. "Smart kids," said the police. What had happened? Okay, so stay tuned for the rest of the story. Hello, hello, hello. You are listening to the No Brainers Empowering Possibilities Show. These are dialogues of encouragement with fresh perspectives, invitations to ahas, a little bit of science, a dash of behavioral psychology, some usable and easy skills to try now, and a whole lot of creative fun. So if leveling up is on your radar, my friend, you are at the right show. I'm your host, Roseanne Marsh. I'm the author of the teen and the parent empowerment curriculum called Level Up. And you are listening to episode number 62, Your Brain on Games. Okay, so did you get what happened? If you listen to the scenario, what do you think happened? Why did the police come? Well, it has to do with the conversation she had on the phone. Let's listen to it again. "Hey, Anna, thanks for the call. Hey, you know those science notes I lent you last week? Well, I really need them back. It would be a great help to me. It's an emergency, so if you could give them to me tomorrow, it would be good. It would be great. Please hurry in finding the notes. I need to get back to my books now. Bye," Emily said. So do you know the answer? Emily had used the mute button during her conversation with Anna. So all Anna heard was call, help, emergency, please hurry. Anna, sensing something was wrong, called the police and told them Emily's address. And the police were able to come to Emily's house in time to catch the perpetrator. Okay, you may not have guessed that. And I have to say, I did not guess that. But I will say, whodunits and puzzles and the lateral thinking that comes from that used to be one of my favorite things to do and one of my stepson's favorite things to do. So I would buy books and we would sit on the couch and read these and try to figure them out. Do like my neighbor does and do some of these with your kids as you're taking them to school. Remember that brain neuroplasticity, where we can get more connections happening in our brain when we expose our brain to different things. When we can expose ourselves to the whodunits, to the solving those problems, it relates into other areas of our life. When a friend of mine listened to episode number 61 about your brain wants to doodle, she mentioned, oh my word, we have so many tools to be able to help us. We forget about those tools. And playing games for our brain is one of those things. Sometimes we think, I'm just so busy, I can't do those things, or it's a waste of time. Or maybe we did do those times and we found that it was kind of an addiction and it felt like it was a time waster. But what if we could just put aside a small amount of time or do it on our way when we're commuting? Allowing our brain a little bit of fun brings that endorphin hit that comes along with it. And the brain is like, oh, I get it. When I expand, when I learn, I get rewarded with these chemicals. Just like that physical muscle, when we exercise it, we get the benefits. Over the next 5 shows, we're going to be talking about the physicality of what we can do for our brain, about the nutrition, about the gut, about the social aspect of it, even some interesting things about sleep. But when we're talking about brain games, if we're not using the fun to train our brain, we're leaving a lot on the table. So what's the most important function of the brain and why? Well, the brain is arguably the most important organ in the human body. It controls and coordinates our actions and our reactions. It allows us to think and feel and enables us to have memories and feelings, all the things that make us human. So cognitive health, that's the ability to clearly think, to learn, to remember, and that's a really important component in performing everyday activities. And that's just one aspect of our brain health. Cognitive health includes paying attention to something in the environment, or learning something new, or making decisions, processing language, sensing and perceiving environmental stimuli, solving problems, and using our memory. So when we talk about using games to train our brain, so focusing on one thing is going to help us, but when we can give it a broad spectrum and give it more experience, we can enlarge the capacity of our brain. There are companies out there where you can get a subscription to their program, where they have a cross section of different things. And sometimes they say they're the end all brain training. And while there's no proof that that literally is all you need for your brain, they do an excellent job of adding in math skills or timed things or conclusions or memory. I used one of those for 1 year, but there are things out there that are free that we can use. I want you to now think about what are some of the games that you played or do still play. One of my favorites was backgammon. And I have to say, I got really good at it. In fact, to the point of where nobody really wanted to play with me because they knew what the outcome would be. But I just love that strategy of thinking ahead a couple moves. Now think about when we use strategy in these games, we are teaching our brains that in real life, when we problem solve, we can strategize. Experts have said that when you get really good at one thing, that's when you need to expose yourself to something different. It's easy for us to want to just play to our strengths, but when it becomes easy for us, time to branch out and train the brain in some other ways. So to boost our working memory and do some strategizing, here's a couple games that our brain really likes. Sudoku. That's amazing because you're adding math and strategy to it. Crossword puzzles. And I love that they give you the answers so that you can go back on it. But here's a level up on the crossword puzzle. If you get into one and you can't solve it, don't just peek. Put it down, walk away for a couple hours and come back. Or put it down until the next day. Your brain will continually work on that in the background until it could maybe come up with an answer, or you come at it with a different angle. Great training with chess. What are those tabletop games that you love to play? What are those word and number puzzles? What are those memory games? Jigsaw puzzles. They engage the short-term memory, really good for spatial relations. I was part of a group that would go to a health hospital in Mexico to get our health coach certifications. And while we're down there in between classes and treatments, we would gather around a large table in the foyer where they always had a huge puzzle there. And what I loved about it, you were gathered around there with people from all over the world. Not only were you getting to know new people and their perspectives and chatting and learning, but you were also training your brain with this little piece of puzzle. And you know what that piece of puzzle does every time you find a spot for it? It gives you a dopamine hit. And that's what keeps us coming back to doing it again and again and again. Now you want to add a quantum leap to puzzle pieces? Turn everything over so it's the blank side up and try to solve the puzzle that way. And hey, another one. Do you remember the matching games we used to play when we were little? That's when the cards would be facing down and you'd turn 2 cards up at a time, hoping that they would match. And if they didn't, you flipped them back over, and then the next person got a turn to be able to see which 2 would match. And it was utilizing your memory. And of course, there were cards for little kids that had pictures of fish or kitties or whatever, but you can just use them with playing cards. Now you can play against someone, or there again, if we want to level up on the matching game, you could use playing cards and use 3 of each. Or if you're really amazing and have a huge table, you could do 4 of each. But sharpening our memory is a really important skill to build. I used Luminosity for a year, and that was a paid subscription. And they had a variety of different things. They had strategy, whodunit, math, timed things, space relations, word associations, creating words. It really was a lot of fun. But there are other apps like Elevate, Conifit, Peak Brain Training, Mensa, And all of these are paid, but there are also some free apps. One of the apps that I went to, it's a website, it's not overly sophisticated, but if you want to step in to just doing a few little brain things, go to Braingle, Braingle. So brain with a GLE on the end of it. And I have some math things, some association. They have card games, they have word games. So you can step into that free and just kind of tiptoe into testing some of these waters. We're talking about stimulating the brain. And one of the things that comes up is, well, what about video games? Well, what about games on your cell phone? There's some amazing games out there. One of my favorite ones is a word game where you're given a certain amount of letters, and then you have to come up with as many words as you can utilizing only those 8 letters. But yes, we've all heard of the crushing games and the birds that fly that are angry. And all these do something for the brain. But remember, anything that we do that becomes an addiction, that takes us away from responsibilities, away from getting things done, or really moving into who we need to be and become, and becomes a huge distraction for us, is counterintuitive to what it is we're doing. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying start playing a gazillion games. What I am saying is, what if you just added like 5 minutes of something? There's some invitations I'm going to have at the very end. But what about gamers, video games? Now, I happen to have a gamer in my home, and he's actually really good at it. But I will say he's spent a lot of time becoming good. When video games came out, I was all for it. When Wii was just a wee little company, I loved the Mario Brothers. I loved all these seemingly simple games that were quantum leaps above the Pac-Man that I grew up on. But I really struggled with the shooting strategy behind many of the games. In fact, I've always said, why isn't there a video game where you go out and serve people of the world and then you get points for that? But then I listened to a YouTube video by Daphne Bavelier, and she is actually a scientist in a lab, and they've been studying the effect of video games on people. And do you know the average age of the gamer is 33 years old? So it's not necessarily the teenager that's doing it, it's the adults that are doing it too. Gaming is here to stay for a while, I think. But they are there to take the statements that people have, the negative statements about playing videos, and see, is there truth behind it? What is the lab tested evidence? One of them they tested is screen time makes your eyesight worse. So they got a group and they made them play video games 15 hours per week and over a number of 4 or 5 weeks. Then they retested their eyesight. They also tested their eyesight in comparison to non-gamers. Do you know what they found out? I said it didn't make their eyesight worse. It actually made it better. And they could see fine detail amidst the clutter, which means that they could read smaller details. And then they could resolve different shades of gray. So if they were driving in fog, for example, they could see through the fog better than a non-gamer. So these games really have features that are powerful for the brain. It gives plasticity and learning, attention and vision. But like anything else, if it's overused or becomes an addiction, where everyday responsibilities are overlooked, then it has its downsides. Another one was that video games lead to attention problems and great distractibility. What they found was that gamers actually are able to track better than non-gamers. And they could see things on a broader perspective than a non-gamer. They could see things on both sides of the screen because they were able to be more alert to different things. And their reflexes were much faster. But then again, if it takes over your life, there's a diminishing return. A couple games she did recommend was the Nintendo Brain Training. It does math and card matching, the Super Mario 64. And then she mentioned one that I have and have still loved, even though my kids don't play it. It was the old Nintendo Wii, Nintendo Sport. And that's where you stand on a pad and you would play either like tennis or soccer or football. And it's recording your actual movements. And so there's the physicality of the training your brain at the same time. So it's one of the best games out there. And I don't even know if they produce it anymore. So if you've got one, hang on to it for your grandkids. One of the most popular brain teasing games that's out there that a large population in the United States is participating in is the New York Times Wordle. And I believe that there might be a subscription to that. I could be wrong, but that's when you write out a word and then you extrapolate new words just by changing out one letter. And then you're trying to guess their word of the day. Now, what would be great is to print that off with your computer. And some people start out their day doing a crossword puzzle or a Wordle or something like that to get their brain stimulated. Now, here's something to pay attention to. When we put pen to paper, it's a good thing because there's a connection with writing with the results of how the brain processes. So both young adults and children, their brains are much more active when they're writing by hand than when they're typing. So the use of pen and paper gives that brain more hooks to hang your memories on. So writing by hand creates much more activity in the sensory motor parts of the brain. So grab that crossword puzzle or grab that book of Sudoku or the matching games. Give those to your kids in the car instead of flipping on a video. Do like my neighbor does and throw on the whodunit storylines and the audible solve the puzzles. I grew up in the era of Nancy Drew, and I love how it helps your creativity. Now, here's another brain game, but it's actually brain learning. Learn a language. There are those apps out there now that make it so fun and so easy. There's Babbel, Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, and many others. And different ones have different ways of doing it. So some of them, like Rosetta Stone, has modules that you go through. Duolingo is really gamified because they have these different awards that you can get when you get to different stages. Same thing, just played a little bit differently. So if you commute, why not learn a foreign language when you're in the car? What language would you like to learn? And there's incredible power about finding a group of people in your area that maybe speak that language. Or where in the world do you want to travel? And what do you want to learn before you go? Some of these apps even have like a speech recognition, so they can help you fine-tune your accent. So I think it's already incredible that you can type into your phone and have it speak out the translation in another language. But how incredible if you can actually maximize some of your downtime, waiting for kids in the car, waiting in line somewhere, commuting, etc. Teach your brain another language. I have a friend that's on her third language. She has a job where she works with her hands and can always be listening to something. I'm going to throw out a kickback from our childhood. How many of you played jacks? Jacks. Yes, the spiky little tiny jack. And then we had a rubber ball, and we'd throw the rubber ball in the air, just like a foot or so, let it bounce, and then we'd grab a jack and then catch the ball. And then the next time we'd grab two and then three, and there's different combinations that we did. When was the last time you thought about that? Not only are we teaching our hand-eye coordination, but there's also that kickback of nostalgia that comes up. How many of your grandkids have ever tried it? I think you need to buy some and teach them how to play jacks. Childhood games that help our brain. You know, they say that we only use 10% of our brain power, but that's not true. We use our brain, but it doesn't all kick on at the same time. So we're using some of it sometimes, some of it another time. And we're never going to wear out our brain. Unless you have some brain damage that prevents learning, we can continue to progress to increase our brain cells with the neurogenesis, increase the connections with the neuroplasticity. You can't use up your brain. It's not like the storage on your cell phone that's going to say, oops, you're 95% full. You're never going to fill up your brain. So when we can sharpen our cognitive and memory skills, it's a run over into all the other parts of our life. But why not do it having fun with some games? So my invitation this week is, first of all, do you want to learn another language? Now is a good time to make it really easy and fun to do so. The second is, what games did you love to play? And which ones can you pull out this week and incorporate? Maybe you start a game night every week, just like my friend does. If you go back to episode number 60, we talk about find your play personality. And then episode number 61 was your brain wants to doodle. Guys, it's the springtime. Our brains are crying out for some cleansing, some rejuvenation, some nourishment, and some dopamine hits. If you enjoy this kind of thing, head on over to levelupteen.com/learn more and learn a little bit about Level Up Empowering Possibilities. This is a transformational journey through the science of the body and the mind, where we take you through ownership of where you're at to empowering tools that are awe-inspiring, which moves you into creatorship so you create the life that you want. And we create a blueprint that we bring down in the here and now that you can start living today. We'd love to have you be a part of the program. If that calls to you, look at the link again in the show notes. As always, guys, we are creators. We can create opportunity this week for your brain to have some fun. Thanks, guys. Take care.